A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the media. Each of you have been invited to join us today as we celebrate the unveiling of the 8th annual ranking of the most generous individuals in India, the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List 2021. Hurun India and EdelGive Foundation have yet again attempted to highlight India's remarkable givers and capture the growing importance of individual givers in India's philanthropic landscape towards nation building. As we begin this press meet, please be informed that the press release will be mailed to you shortly. May we also request you to 1. Select the speaker view option on your screens for a better experience, and 2. To type in all your queries for our speakers to the chat handle titled Media Queries. Thank you. The flow of events for this afternoon would be individual addresses to the media by both the spokespersons, Mr. Anas Rahman Junaid and Ms. Vidya Shah, followed by the launch of this year's EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List 2021, post which we will have a fireside chat with both our speakers that will merge into the Q&A session that we will have at the end, where we will be taking all the queries from each of you that would be typed through the course of this event to the chat handle titled Media Queries. Hurun Report, established 20 years ago by Rupert Hugworth, has today taken the shape of a global authority that tracks wealth creation, renowned for its most comprehensive Global Rich List, India Rich List, and China Rich List. Anas Rahman Junaid met Rupert Hugworth, the founder of Hurun Global, through the Oxford University and went on to later co-founding Hurun India in 2012 and has since been serving as the definitive voice in celebrating transparent wealth creation, innovation, and philanthropy. To set the tone for this afternoon's proceedings, may I invite Mr. Anas Rahman Junaid, Managing Director and Chief Researcher, Hurun India, to address this gathering and shed some light on key findings from the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List 2021. Over to you.
Hi, very good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are staying safe. I hope all you're staying safe, and thank you very much for your time. A couple of weeks back, we launched the 10th edition of Hurun India Rich List, and the list clearly showed the fact that India is witnessing the fastest wealth creation era in our history. And I really believe that the most important derivative of wealth creation should be philanthropy. Today is all about celebrating the responsible side of Indian wealth creation. On behalf of Hurun India and the EdelGive Foundation, I welcome you all to the launch of the 8th edition of EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List. The stories of entrepreneurs on the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List help tell the story of modern philanthropy in India. 6 times in 5 years, the cumulative donation in the list has grown from just under rupees 2,500 crores to more than 14,700 crores today. Considering the wealth creation velocity in India, in 5 years, I expect the cumulative donation to grow to at least rupees 30,000 crores. Another promising trend that I found in this year's list is increase in private donations. 80% of the cumulative donation on the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List constitutes personal philanthropy. That is, the donations that are in excess of stipulated mandatory CSR spend of 2%. In the list per se, in terms of number of individuals who have done personal donations, that has grown in excess of 85% from 21 years last year to 39 today. Impact of self-made wealth creation philanthropy is one point that I would like to touch upon. Around 66% of Hurun India Rich List is self-made, whereas only 53% of the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List is self-made. Interestingly, almost everyone under the age of 40 featured in the Hurun India Rich List is self-made. So in 5 years, we estimate that about 85% of the super wealth creators in the country would be self-made. So this band of self-made entrepreneurs and CXO, like I said, philanthropy would be the derivative of wealth creation. And this brand of self-made entrepreneurs and CXOs are going to redefine philanthropy in India. Then entrepreneurs from pharma and software sectors, which are the top wealth creators in the Hurun India rich list, is also in the top position in terms of cumulative value donations in the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy list. Some of the tech entrepreneurs who I have interacted with are in the process of finalizing substantial giving plans to causes ranging from education to climate change. For instance, the Kamath brothers of Zerodha have plans to give back US $100 million or INR almost 650 crores over the next few years. I expect to see much more new wealth creators turned givers gaining a spot in the future edition of EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy list. I'm very stoked about the fact that more and more young entrepreneurs are venturing into philanthropy. For me personally, last year's best news was Binny Bansal being the first philanthropist under the age of 40 to enter the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy list. So this year, Nikhil Kamath, 35, is youngest on the list. I'm hoping next year there could be an even younger entrepreneur to feature on the list. I hope this will inspire more young wealth creators to not only donate, but also to speak more about their donations. I would also like to speak about C-level executives. They are professional managers who are creating amazing companies, building wealth for themselves and the team below. These C-level executives have been playing a very impactful and rather muted role in Indian philanthropy. But this year, we have debuted Mr. M. Naik of L&T, who donated about INR 112 crores, and Amit Chandra and Archan Chandra, who donated rupees 19 crores. This is impressive considering the fact that they are amongst the top 100 philanthropists in the country, ahead of more than 900 individuals who featured in the Hurun India rich list. Some of the other professionals who are serious philanthropists who have not yet featured in the list and would include Mr. K.P. Balraj, V.T. Bharadwaj, and so on. The preferred cause of India's top philanthropists has been education all this while, but on the back of COVID-19, disaster relief has grown dramatically to become the most popular cause this year. Some of the other highlights to quickly talk about the list is number one is Mr. Azim Premji, who's donated rupees 9,713 crores. He retains the title of India's most generous. Fun fact is he donated almost rupees 27 crores per day over the last year. HCL Shiv Nadar retains the second spot with an annual donation of rupees 1,263 crores. 11 in the list made an annual donation of over rupees 100 crores, 20 over 50 crores, and 42 in the list made donations over to 20 crores last year. Bollywood superstar Akshay Kumar, Akshay Kumar donated rupees 26 crores and debuts this year's list. With a donation of rupees 50 crores, India's own Big Bull Ragesh Jhunjhunwala stormed into EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropist, and he's the most generous new entrant. Now, all this data is there in the detailed report that will be shared with you. But from a philanthropist perspective, one of the fundamental questions that we researchers try to answer is what is the definition of philanthropy? The other day, we were speaking to the global chairman, Rupert, speaking to an international entrepreneur, and he said he donated a new building to a well-known university. Now, one of the debates is that corporate branding? Should that entrepreneur have donated a building in a lesser-known university? So we don't have an answer for that. That's a pursuit to understand more answers to those kind of questions. The next question is that how much is to be left for next generation? Now, Hurun Global Research Institute have done a calculation on how much is enough, and for a super rich wealthy to have satisfied with money with no additional real utility, and that's about US $50 million. An answer to this question could possibly have an impact on philanthropy and how much could be left to the next generation in terms of wealth transfer and how much could be allocated to philanthropy. But one thing I'm 100% sure is that we need to celebrate these stories. The new generation is very much influenced by the actions of respected wealth creators. You could very well look at the rise of meme stocks or cryptocurrencies based on tweets from some entrepreneurs. So the established wealth creators do play a role in terms of influencing the decisions and investments and even possibly philanthropy of some of the new wealth creators. And so I believe that the philanthropists should not just walk the talk, but also talk the walk. I really hope this report can inspire more individuals to become philanthropists and more philanthropists to share their story, thereby amplifying the flywheel effect. For preparing the report, we're very fortunate to have partnered with EdelGive Foundation, who I consider the leader in India's philanthropy world. And many a times, we as researchers, we stick to numbers, and our information is limited to what is available in the public domain in terms of our reports and so on. But EdelGive Foundation's on-the-ground experience and pragmatic knowledge has gained us access to some of the philanthropists in the list, and we could share some of these stories with the support given by the EdelGive team. I'm really fortunate to have partnered with them again for the fourth time. To conclude, I dedicate this list to Mr. Jamsetji Tata, who was the icon of, who I consider the icon of Indian philanthropy, and he featured the #1 position in the EdelGive Hurun Philanthropist of the Century list, which was launched a few months back. I really hope we can do a face-to-face press conference next year. Once again, thank you very much for your time and look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anas. Ms. Vidya Shah, Executive Chairperson of the EdelGive Foundation, has over the last 13 years steered the growth of Edelweiss social investments to develop EdelGive into a strategic philanthropic organization. Vidya has channeled EdelGive's structure of giving to include both financial and non-financial support to this special cohort of organizations. To shed light on the respectable work of the EdelGive Foundation and give us a bird's eye view on the association of the hour, may I invite Ms. Vidya Shah. Over to you, Vidya.
Thank you, Shobita. Thank you so much. And thank you, Anas, for that lovely introduction to this year's report. As always, the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy list is a very exciting event in our calendar because we get to know of so many new entrants into the list, and the way the list is prepared with all its cuts across the various parameters makes it a very exciting read. So thank you for that, Anas. As some of you in the audience know, EdelGive and Hurun have been collaborating on the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy list for the last 3 years, during which time both organizations have had the privilege of documenting and analyzing the constantly evolving patterns of philanthropic giving in India. This year, the list provides us with yet another important opportunity to gain profound insights into the mindsets and the motivations that drive philanthropy in India as it emerges from a paradigm-shifting COVID-19 pandemic. In the age of information overload, the report enables a more holistic understanding of the trends, the motivations, the mindsets that drive philanthropy. The report lays down a narrative indicating the paths that the philanthropic sector has taken to get to this point, and most importantly, charts the course that it may likely take moving forward. Some of you may know a little bit about EdelGive, but to just encapsulate, we are a 14-year-old foundation born out of the Edelweiss group that has really taken upon itself the mission of helping build the Indian civil society by focusing on funding and building the capacity of small and medium-sized organizations. Starting from a small portfolio of individual organizations that we carefully chose and funded, today we work with over 43 nonprofits across the country, but most importantly are pioneers in terms of building collaborative funding models that enable institutions, foundations, and high net worths come together to fund causes that usually don't see enough attention, and structurally try and build a model which enables new and old philanthropists build more strategic models of giving. Coming back to the report, I think most importantly, in a year that has seen significant wealth creation that Anas also alluded to, but this significant wealth creation has been in small parts of the economy. So this significant wealth creation on the one hand that we have seen, but on the other, the widespread devastation of communities living on the margins and of grassroots organizations that serve them, this report assumes greater importance. In some ways, I would say that the health of a society can be measured by the quality of its philanthropy, its philanthropists and their practice of philanthropy, the issues that they support, their terms of engagement with civil society, and their desire to work towards a more equitable world. I would urge all of us to view this report in this light as well, not just as a celebration of their generosity, but also a hope that those with incredible privilege can serve fellow humans and inspire others like them to follow in their footsteps. So thank you again, Anas, for having me here. Thank you, Shobita, as well. And I hope we have a great event and a great launch of this really important report.
Thank you very much, Vidya. Having set some concrete context, it is our joy to unveil the list of the hour. The EdelGive Foundation and Hurun India present the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List 2021. Like Vidya said, it is an attempt at shedding light on the mindsets and motivations that drive philanthropy in India as we emerge from a paradigm-shifting pandemic. Can we have the video played, please? To discuss the EdelGive Hurun India Philanthropy List 2021 and some inspiring insights therein, may I now invite Anas Rahman Junaid and Vidya Shah. And as they do so, a gentle reminder to the audience to select the speaker view option on your screens for a better experience and to type in all your queries for our speakers to the chat handle titled Media Queries so they can all be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Anas and Vidya.
Thank you, Shobita. I think we have. I'll possibly ask a couple of questions and leave the floor to the media to ask any questions if they might have. I think Vidya, you did spread a very important message about hope and this list just not being about celebration, and it's that's actually quite impactful, that thought process. I'm going to take that home with me from today. There's one question, is, if you look at the causes that have emerged as some of the key movers of philanthropy, it's been education, healthcare, and environmental causes. And education has always been the number one cause for donation. Do you think the philanthropic efforts these days, are they, by these entrepreneurs, are they focused more on short term compared to curbing at grassroots levels? Then also, I've also seen one interesting trend wherein, especially in the entrepreneurs who've been running businesses for a while, their philanthropies focus on their local communities and not addressing nationwide problems. What are your thoughts on that? And further in this regard, could you speak a little more about EdelGive's Grow Fund and what it aims to achieve?
No, I think that's a very important point you've made, and as if you've seen over the last few reports, we do see that there is more funding going towards a few sectors, and there is more funding that tends to be short term. I think CSRs by their very nature are forced to be short term because their budgets get determined, unfortunately, annually. But that does not preclude funders from adopting a sort of longer term focus, largely because we all know that social change is very complicated. It is very difficult because it just does not involve educating a child or finding a job for a person who lives on the margins. It's also about a shift in beliefs. It's a shift in attitudes and mindsets. And that tends to take time. If you look at issues like, for example, gender equality, or if you look at even issues of climate and environment, you find that there is less funding going there. There's a lot more funding going towards education and healthcare, which tend to be more measurable. But I think as philanthropy evolves, the practice of philanthropy, as philanthropy grows, the practice of philanthropy must also change. It must mature. It must develop into something that emulates, the sophistication that we see in other parts of the economy. And that means that as funders, we have to be more mindful about what we are funding and not just about ensuring that we measure it right. And that means you have to fund issues that can have long-term impact on economy. For example, I think gender equality is one such issue. We underestimate the role that women play both in the informal as well as in the formal economy. The number of women who are in the agriculture sector actually exceeds 45% of its workforce. And then if you add the jobs that women do in terms of unpaid labor and so on, it's actually a huge contribution to the economy that goes under-recognized. And then when you try and build mind shift changes away from, sort of a patriarchal norm, the chance of growing the country and its economy and its society side by side, that those chances go up. I think the one trend that we've seen in the midst of COVID, which has also been brought out by the report, is really the incredible response of Indians to COVID relief work. And we've seen over the years that disaster relief work is getting more and more and more support. But I think in the midst of this sort of very happy change, what we are also seeing is that a lot of grassroots organizations, those that work with communities that they're hoping to change, they saw a severe shortage of funding. And I think Grow from EdelGive the Grow Fund is really an attempt to work with 100 organizations across India and across sector, being agnostic to sector, but to try and build the capability of these grassroots organizations, because ultimately at the time of COVID, it was these organizations that were at the forefront of serving the communities, whether through food relief, whether through medical relief, whether through being there to solve issues within communities around violence or around children not being able to go to school. All of that was really handled at the, in communities by these organizations, and supporting them is really important.
And Vidya, I want to ask you one question. I did mention in my speech about the impact of self-made wealth creation in philanthropy. You've been talking to philanthropists across generations and so on. Do you agree with what I said in my speech, or would you see more philanthropy from emanating from self-made entrepreneurs in the future?
No, I personally think that we're at a very exciting time in the country, in terms of wealth creation and economic growth. We are at the cusp of actually some amazing, changes that we can see. As it is, I think a lot of data on the economy is showing that we are back to 2007 levels of, sort of demand. If you've seen, there's an incredible demand for people. Almost every company is sort of adding on to staff, and there aren't enough people out there who are qualified enough for people to join the workforce. In addition to that, we have the trend of entrepreneurship that we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And therefore, I'm very hopeful that as the economy matures, we will see a lot more enterprises that are coming out of first generation technocrats and people who have, who do not come with the backing of an industry house. I understand it intrinsically because in a sense, I also belong to a first generation entrepreneurial family. So I think that is a very exciting time. I think how that starts influencing philanthropy is going to be very, very interesting to watch. So since Hurun looks at the rich list as well as the the philanthropy list, it's going to be a very important time of seeing who keeps up, whether philanthropy actually keeps up with the growth in wealth. And I'm personally very hopeful because I think we're at a very different time in the world where there's a lot more awareness and a lot more concern for our fellow human beings. Most of us who are not happy with the way things are have the ability to speak. and we may speak in different ways. We may use social media, or we may use our work to express what we feel. But I think generosity is going to be a very visible quality or a trait that not only your employees are looking at it, not only are your peers looking at it, but there are whole indices now. There is the Hurun list, but you have all these ESG indicators. And there is, I think, a good level of moral pressure that's now emerging. So what's going to be interesting is, to see if philanthropy, and I'm personally hopeful that philanthropy will keep pace with the level of wealth creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is primary motivation behind this list as well. If this list can help inspire a donation of 1,000 crores, at some point, I mean, that will be the biggest achievement than anything else. And I agree with you. Even I've been speaking to some of the startup entrepreneurs, and some of them will feature possibly in the next year's list. They're all actively working towards creating structures and start philanthropy and so on, and that's quite exciting for me. And even last year, Binny Bansal, who debuted last year's list, he's increased donation by almost 100% to in this year's list. So I think it's quite exciting. And possibly before I go to the media question, just one more question that I want to ask you. The software and pharma seems to be leading in terms of the philanthropy. And I'm sure we have the list that we put out is possibly not the full list. We might have missed a lot of philanthropists. But what is your thoughts? Is it other industry, the entrepreneurs from other sectors? Would you see a lot more philanthropy? Or maybe once the startup ecosystem matures and a lot of cash outs happen, you could possibly see other sectors. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think software, and I'm sure there's some business press, who's also going to cover this report, will know that you just have to look at the index and decide, where a lot of the philanthropists must emerge from. And I would presume that pharma and IT services should be, it has to be par for the course, because both these industries have done incredibly well over the last few years. But even during COVID, I think they really held their own. So I would presume that. I think what is going to be interesting, not so much from an industry level, but really looking at it from, sort of a change in mindset level. I think when the CSR laws first came out, it was viewed as compliance. Of course, our regulation has gotten tighter. But what is interesting in the report, that there are a number of companies that have far exceeded their CSR mandate, right? So I think that is an interesting trend, where after a while, CSR just becomes a sort of a compass, but doesn't become the mainstay. You do it not because, there is a law that is making you do it, but you do it because that's the right thing to do. In the midst of COVID, people who have far exceeded their CSR, allocation really need to be commended, because they didn't need to do it. They could have just completely shifted, like unfortunately, some companies did. Completely shifted and let go of their regular programming. So I think that's going to be interesting. I think CSR as a trend is probably maturing. There's a lot more sophistication that I'm personally hopeful will emerge. And I think, where are the new sources of wealth? And the new sources of wealth do tend to be in some of the new age industries. A lot of them led by the internet, digital businesses. And they can be selling anything, but they tend to be digital. So I think we should keep an eye out for that as well, and see whether that trend continues. What is also interesting, like you said, Anas, that we may have missed a few people. There are people who should be there who aren't there. Of course, I always use this platform to urge people to write to Hurun and to talk about your philanthropy, because it's not just a list. It's not because one needs to be featured on this list. It's because the list serves as, a place for other people to role model and emulate. Just as you celebrate great entrepreneurship and you celebrate people who invest in great entrepreneurship, you have to also celebrate people who invest in generosity, because that serves as a role model for other people as well. And it's not about the numbers ultimately. It's not about that. Ultimately, it's about whether you have that balance between obviously creating wealth for your company, for your employees, for yourself, but also are you looking at large parts of India which unfortunately continue to not see the benefits of this incredible growth in the middle class and in this incredible growth and wealth of the country.
Thank you. Thanks, Vidya. So over to you, Shobhita. If there are questions from media, we possibly take it now.
Thank you, Anas. Thank you, Vidya. Yes, we have a few questions that have come in. And as we begin with the Q&A session, I would encourage all our friends from media to type in all your queries to the chat handle that's titled Media Queries. Our speakers are here. They're more than willing to respond to your queries as well. On that note, we have the first question from Ashish from PTI. This question is for Mr. Anas. And the question reads, according to you, who will replace Jamshedji Tata in the 21st century?
Thank you, Ashish. Hope you're well. I think Mr. Jamshedji Tata is irreplaceable, according to me, because what he has done, the precedent that he has set in terms of donating a good part of a great company towards philanthropy, that process, that is absolutely original, right? So I don't think he is replaceable in any measure. But then there would be new stars who are definitely role models in what they're doing. For example, Mr. Azim Premji, Mr. Shiv Nadar. No, so they're all the kind of seriousness that they've given to philanthropy. They're all going to be legendary in times to come, and India will, and entrepreneurs and wealth creators and philanthropies will always talk about them. And you would also, I also really believe that some of these tech entrepreneurs who are planning some serious philanthropic initiatives to tackle things like climate change, which is such an important topic and which we are not aware of, which most of us are not clear about, so these tech entrepreneurs are also going to play a huge role. I think Mr. Jamshedji Tata is not replaceable, but you would see a lot more legends of philanthropy coming from India in the next 10, 20 years. I hope I answered your question. Vidya, would you have a response to that?
No, I think Anas, it's Jamshedji was a icon in his own time, and he was probably a product also of his time, because this was in colonial India, and I'm sure it was a very, very hard time anyway. So to be in business at that time with serving kind of two masters, you have the British on the one hand and you have your own country on the other, to do what he did was truly unique. So it's so difficult to compare anybody, but I think the generosity that we have seen, and as our press friends go through the list, we'll see some amazing names, and I'm really hopeful that this is now a trend. Just as we see in the US, there is just an innate inbuilt trend around generosity and giving. I'm really hoping that we start seeing that as well in our country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anas and Vidya. As a follow-on to that question, we have another question for Vidya. It reads, often corporates use philanthropy for brand building. How far is this a good idea?
I think the one thing that has made our country unique is really the CSR law. I remember the whole debate, between 2010 and 2014, there was really a vociferous argument on both sides as to whether CSR should be a mandate or should it be something that companies should do of their own. I think the one significant change that I have seen is CSR, large parts of CSR, very, very few small pockets would be excluded, would be, be an exception pre-2014. A lot of the programs that was CSR were actually not so much around brand, they were a lot around employees. It was a little bit around brand, but there was a lot more around, doing work around your factories, doing work for your employees, building better living conditions for your employees, things like that, especially when it came to manufacturing facilities which were not, in the main cities. I think what the CSR law did is actually make corporate India sit up and acknowledge and come forward around its responsibility to broader society. And therefore, if you see the change, you see a lot more NGOs, which previously did not get the support, actually getting support. So over the last 7-8 years, the number of NGOs who are now, regularly featuring on the lists of CSRs, in terms of their give has really grown. I think brand building is something that comes naturally to businesses. They exist for their brand. They exist to build their brand. They exist to grow their business. And I'm not one to quarrel if a little bit of CSR, goes into establishing a name board somewhere, or naming a program after the company, because I feel in the end, if it is intended towards a good cause, and if it achieves that, having your name on the doors of a school shouldn't be something that I would personally grudge. But I don't see that as a very widespread and a common phenomenon. It's not as broad as as widespread as one would think it is.
Thank you, Vidya. There's another question coming your way, Vidya. It reads, which are some of the innovative funding models in philanthropy that are changing the game in social welfare and development?
I think there are 2 or 3 things, one of which, of course, has got announced recently in terms of the social stock exchange, which should be an interesting development for us to watch, as it enables a lot of NGOs, to build their own capabilities so that they can list and raise funding just the way companies raise funding, except that these are grants and not really, equity or debt instruments. I think that is a very interesting trend. It is also been attempted, but with limited or mixed success in other parts of the world. And the amount of thought that has gone into this in our country is something that makes me a little hopeful that something will come of it. But more importantly, I think I'm very excited about collaborative funds, just like, for example, the Grow Fund that we're trying to do, which is really pooling and getting a lot more people to come together, address a cause, and help build a civil society that is stronger with its capability, so that it can scale and address issues that really need a scaled approach. So I think there's a lot very interesting things going on. Of course, there are the development impact bonds, and there's all kinds of interesting instruments out there. You see that a lot more in the West. But here, I think in India, if we can make some headway in terms of coming together and looking at pooled funds, that will be a very interesting time for our philanthropy.
Thank you, Vidya. The next question that's come our way is for Anas, and the question reads, how do you plan to encourage more entrepreneurs, established corporates, to participate in philanthropy?
I think that's how do I do it first? How do we do as Hurun? I think, of course, we try to do it through the philanthropy list. Every time when we launch a philanthropy list, right, we get message from entrepreneurs saying, we'd like to feature there next year and feature the list next year. This has happened in this last year's list. We launched last year's list. I got one of the entrepreneurs wrote to me saying, hey, how do we feature in the philanthropy list? I told him, you just have to start donating. That is the easiest and the only way to feature in a philanthropy list. So I'm nowhere saying that the philanthropy, the EdelGive Hurun India philanthropy list is the ultimate destination, so to speak, for anybody to start donating. But I do honestly believe that we possibly are trying to promote more entrepreneurs to talk the walk, in terms of philanthropy. That's what we are trying to do from our perspective. And whenever we meet the entrepreneurs, we share these stories of philanthropy, what they do. Sometimes EdelGive and Hurun, we meet some of the entrepreneurs together. We share some of the thoughts and initiatives. So these are all little ways through which we try and promote philanthropy. And somewhere down the line, I think it's very important that we speak about these stories. We speak about these good stories to others, right? So, and somehow my end goal, so to speak, through the EdelGive Hurun philanthropy list is to possibly convey a message to the entrepreneurs that it is very important to speak about philanthropy to get others into philanthropy. And to speak about philanthropy, one has to actually start doing philanthropy. And one way to speak about philanthropy through us is to possibly start donating and be part of the list. So that is what we do. I think it is what we do, and possibly institutions like EdelGive Foundation is possibly a catalyst, act as catalyst in terms of helping identify the right causes and the organization to support and so on. I hope I answered the questions clear enough.
Thank you, Anas. The next question is for Vidya. The question reads, what roles do grassroots organizations play in affecting change at scale? How important is it for them to be resilient and strong?
As I said, a little earlier, I think if you just look back over the last 15, 17, 18 months since we've had COVID, and look at who were the first, the frontline workers, who were the people who were at first response. And we find out of the list of these great doctors and nurses and municipal staff and government staff and police and a whole host of people, the one constituency that tends to get underrepresented or not spoken about really is civil society and NGOs. If you see, especially in the first phase, we saw a lot of them really being at the forefront of distributing rations, of providing medical supplies, just being in their own communities. Of the NGOs that we work with, a large number of them and their staff themselves got COVID, in the first phase as well as in the second wave. And I think one thing that we didn't realize is really how fragile most of these organizations became. As it is, a lot of the small community-based organizations are fragile because they end up almost living year to year in terms of their own financing. They're dependent on funders who like to work with organizations like these. Some of them work in teams that are not necessarily, supported by philanthropy, especially around climate, environment, and especially gender equality on the social empowerment side, around violence, around leadership building in communities, and so on and so forth. I think their fragility got even more exposed during COVID. So while the second phase especially was really hard because a large part of the NGO teams actually had either their own staff or the families of staff being infected. And as a result, I'm sure we are seeing that even among journalists and reporters because they were in the front lines as well. And I think, therefore, for us, focusing on their sustainability, focusing on their financial resilience is really important, and therefore, I think if you don't have a civil society that is capable of overcoming hurdles like the ones we've just faced over the last 2 years, which will continue in some form or fashion, we will end up, having an NGO sector that will become more and more fragile. So it's really important to really focus on what we call indirect cost funding, non-programmatic costs. We need people there, and people need to be paid, and people need to earn a good wage, for them to be able to do the kind of work that they do. So in that sense, I think supporting them and supporting their resilience is very, very important.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you so much to both our speakers, Vidya and Anas, for taking those queries that came in our way. As we close this meet, kindly be informed that the spokespersons will also be available for media bites and interviews after this meeting. Thank you, friends of the media and press, for joining us this afternoon. We truly look forward to your generous covers on our attempt at highlighting India's remarkable givers of 2021. Have a lovely evening and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. We leave.